Hello and welcome everyone to the Trusted Advisor Show. We have a special episode for you this week for our regular listeners. If I don't sound like our normal lead host, Rob Jacoman, that's because this is not Rob. In fact, this week, Rob is going to be one of the stars of our show. We're talking about a really hot topic. We're going to talk today about mitigating risk, which is our next step beyond the business impact analysis when we're talking about business continuity planning. So we're really excited. We also have our other co-host, Devin Walsh, my partner at State and Walsh. And we are also super excited to have our partner, Laura Decker, back. Laura is back with us after being on maternity leave, and also some exciting news with the launch of her new company, SSGI Benefits. So welcome back, Laura. We're excited to have everyone here. I'm going to dive right into it today. We're going to talk about our next step of the process, which is mitigating risk. So I want to start off a little bit. I think most business owners think they have a pretty good understanding of what risk is and what the risks to their business are. But Rob, tell us a little bit more, take a deeper dive into risk and risk mitigation and some of the things that you guys do to help your clients.
Yeah, I think the best place to start for this particular discussion today and how it ties into what we've talked about already in previous episodes is truly having an understanding of what risk really is. And because I think there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding about risk and how it pertains to a particular business or organization. So risk in and of itself, it's if you boil it down to the most basic principle, it's really all about how something, a risk or exposure. Now, when we talk about exposure, we're talking about something it's in your business. We'll dive deeper into this. We want to discuss basically the financial impact of a loss. That is in and of itself the most simple and basic explanation of what risk is. And one of the things that we do that's so important is, and as we get more into detail about how to assess risk, we're going to talk today right now about how we can better manage that risk or mitigate that risk, and some strategies and techniques and some tips for everyone who's obviously listening or watching this. But really what we do best and as you're bringing your trusted advisors and your team together is reverse engineering the process. And I think that's so critical to reverse engineer and identify at the end, what is it that what risk exists? What level of exposure is my unique business, because every business is unique. But sitting down with your team and your trusted advisors to reverse engineer that process is the best place to start.
No, it's a great point, Rob. And I think it's important to understand too, that it's a great segue and really keeps a smooth process moving forward of creating your plan, because it sounds like, we talked last episode about business impact analysis and identifying what the real threats are to your business. So then taking that a step further and going to that end, what's the worst thing that could happen? And it sounds like you guys do a really good job of kind of backing away from that and saying, all right, we know there's a probability that this can happen. So how can we protect against that? Which is great. And just, I guess, elaborating on that point, when talking to business owners in detail about next steps of mitigating risk in the process of going forward to doing that, Devin, what are the conversations that you find yourself having that maybe a business owner that thinks they're protected may have missed?
So when you're talking to business owners about risk mitigation, especially on the financial side, I think it's really important to know what the key people. I think it's one of the biggest risks that employees talk about is the key people, what they're truly worth to your business. Ryan, we see it all the time when we're talking to business owners. We do a business valuation for a business, and the first thing we always ask them is, what's your number worth? The number's never, usually not even close to what the actual valuation is. And a lot of the times, if they're underinsured or they don't even have insurance on a key person or a top salesperson, it could be detrimental to a business. So if you have a key person that just leaves the business, and that's a huge risk. It's not just death or disability. It's just somebody just leaving the business, and you don't have some type of benefits package or something in place where they can actually give that person, incentivize them to stay for 10 years because they might be bringing $1 million of revenue to the business. That's a huge risk of them leaving and going to a competitor. So really reviewing and really figuring out what your key employees and other parts of the management team, the executive team, are actually worth to your business, and truly ensuring them, whether it's through a type of policy or some type of benefit or wherever it may be, to kind of keep them with the firm, whether it's in the case of them leaving or God forbid something bad would happen to them in case of disability or death.
That's actually a fantastic point. I think one of the things that we often miss, or one of the things we focus on and business owners focus on, is they think about catastrophic risks, things that take away from their business because of a catastrophic event. And they tend to look away from things like you mentioned, Devin, people, key people. I mean, somebody walking out the door is a great example of something that it's a risk, and it could be catastrophic, but it's not in the traditional sense that you mentioned. And you mentioned benefits package. I think that's a good place for Laura to maybe chime in and talk a little bit about some of those risks that are there for employers, especially in the benefits space, and keeping people and employees engaged that I guess are outside the traditional sense of, a catastrophic event like a fire or flood, things like that. So just, could you touch on that a little bit?
So what we do for looking at mitigating risk is we want to try and mitigate risk for the entire population. And the way that we like to do that is by putting in additional products that can protect an employee from something like coronavirus, ending up in the ICU for 2 weeks. But even if that doesn't happen from an employer standpoint, if we're able to protect an entire population, we're typically able to help reduce costs between the employer and employee to share. However, when that employee experiences something like COVID-19, if they go into the hospital, we're able to put together benefit packages where it has not only health insurance, but short-term disability, hospital indemnity plans, and virtual primary care physician plans. So we've come up in the face of COVID-19 of, okay, companies are struggling to hang on, they need their employees to do the work. However, many people are impacted by this sickness. So how can we on the front end mitigate that risk to prevent that from happening over a large group of people? So that is,
Great.
coronavirus has really taken risk for us on the benefits package to a whole new level, to really look at a group and say, we need to focus on this now before that big thing happens. Because if the global pandemic has taught us anything, it's going to happen. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would say to any business owner, which is you're either going to pay now or you're going to pay later. So let's take a look at what we can do now to reduce that risk. Because for our purposes, from a benefit standpoint, the risk is there because it's going to happen. Someone is going to have some sort of health issue. COVID-19 is just a good example of a national and worldwide crisis where employers are realizing, okay, what can we do to help if something like that happens?
Yeah, and hey, Ryan, I wanted to jump in there because Laura's making a great point. She's making a great point because what she's talking about is what we look at as personnel capital, which is one of the things. So let's take a step back for a minute, because one of the things that before we go too more into the weeds on specifics, it's probably beneficial to tie in to what we talked about last time is we're talking about bringing your business continuity team together, right? Your committee and your trusted advisors to now we're talking about risk, right? So if we're reverse engineering this process and we're including all the stakeholders in that decision-making process, whether you're a large business or not, it doesn't matter. This works for that mom and pop, construction company, or it works for a restaurant, or, whatever business you're in. This can apply. This whole process, it's a duplicatable process that you can actually execute and implement in your business. So if you take a step back with your team, however large or however small that team is, so long as the major stakeholders and decision makers are in the room, you want to look at three primary areas of your business. So as you're looking at identifying all these various exposures and risks in your unique business, you want to look at three areas. Number one, you want to look at your personnel, your personnel capital. Anything that relates to how your people and managing risks related to your people, whether it be, looking at employment risks or wage and hour issues or whatever the case may be, you have to identify those risks. Number two would be your process, your business model itself. Ryan, you talked last week about, the last episode, you talked about your logistics and your supply chain. That's a critical piece of assessing the business model that you have and the critical pieces of managing risk related to your supply chain, related to your manufacturing process, related to all these different things. If you sit down and identify what those areas are, and that's why it's important to have trusted advisors and people who have the experience to do that, and you're drawing in that experience to help you make better decisions. But then the third thing is looking at your assets. Looking at your physical and financial assets, and then tying that into what Devin was talking about is really looking at your financial picture as well as all your physical property or your intellectual property, because that's another thing that we have to take in consideration, is all that has value, right? So there are definitely financial risks and exposures related to that. And then once you identify all those things in those three primary areas, because we want to keep this really simple and basic, then you can have the power and the wherewithal from your team to make better decisions about how you address those individual risks. And Devin talked about severity versus probability, and you can put a whole metrics together on how you assess the risk for that individual thing that you're evaluating. So that to me is boiling it down to the most basic, simple things that are going to enable you and empower you and your team to make better decisions for your business.
Well, and
Those are
Rob,
all
can I
great
jump
points.
in for a
Okay,
second?
sure.
So I just want to add one point to what Rob said. I made a very specific point about benefits and how it related to COVID-19. However, from a generalization standpoint, part of the reason we have the Trusted Advisors Network is because when I know the financials of a company and I'm working with someone like Ryan and Devin, or when I know what the risk is on the property side when it comes to, commercial assets, it gives me a better picture and a bigger ability to utilize those resources to maybe redirect them to mitigate risk for the personnel. And so part of the reason that we work there is because if we want to mitigate the risk overall for a business, we each need to work together for that business owner so we have the full picture.
Yeah, agreed.
Laura, you hit the nail on the head right there, because we're not doing, I know us personally, we're not going to be doing our job for our clients, the business owners, if we have them perfectly protected in our areas, but we don't review everything in Rob's world or your world, and something happens in those two spectrums and they go out of business because we didn't talk about that and put in another advisor to help that out. So that's a great point. One of the beautiful things about what we're doing is kind of looking at everything, creating a team approach to help mitigate risk. So good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement with that. I mean, look, our businesses are pretty well intertwined with one another, and a big part of this process, and I think we kind of reiterate this every week, is that it's heavily reliant. Your success is going to be heavily reliant on a lot of different people. This is not a one-man show or a one person show. It's not just the owner who's going to put this together efficiently. So as business professionals out there, rely on your people. You have a lot of people surrounding you. I think that if they have a vested interest in your success, they're going to want to help. Every one of you talked about some really important aspects of this process. I think it's to kind of round this out and to summarize and just, close this conversation out. I think what we all are looking to do is provide advice, give, and Rob, you talked about it, reverse engineering that process and then allowing the business owner to make the decision. Do you want to retain that risk on your own balance sheet as a business, or do you want to transfer it to someone else? Most people think of insurance traditionally, but there's a lot of other ways to do that. There's, contracting other employees, consultants, other people. So, there's really not just a traditional approach to this. And sometimes if you take that route, you can miss a couple things. So, I just want to, Rob, just wrap up with some of your final thoughts, a takeaway for a business owner to say, what's one thing that you need to do immediately to start, I guess, analyzing and start thinking about mitigating risk from your perspective? What's one takeaway that a business owner can start with?
Yeah, I love that question, Ryan. Thank you. I think the number one thing you can do is, regardless of what kind of business or industry you're in, is to sit down, bring all your trusted advisors and your business continuity planning team together, and sit down and identify those risks and exposures. Remember what I said about risk. Risk is really about financial impact. So when you look at financial impact of those various things, whether it be, should I invest in this piece of equipment? Should I put processes and procedures in place to mitigate the potential exposure of my employees and vendors when they come to my business, especially given the COVID-19 situation? So you literally have to walk through all those different exposures, and COVID-19 right now is the hot thing because it's a major risk. We didn't even get into the the wage and hour and the EPLI risk and all those different liability areas, and cyber liability. Cyber liability is going through the roof right now because there's more exposure. So sitting down as a business and identifying what those risks and exposures are, given the new landscape in the environment, that then gives your team the power of information. So once you have that information, then you can decide as an organization or as a business, like you said, Ryan, do I want to retain this risk, right? Do I want to take on the financial risk and the potential impact? Or number two, because there's only two options, number two, really, do I want to transfer that risk? And then regardless of the choice you make, whether you decide to retain or transfer that risk through the various mechanisms, insurance is one of them. It's basically transferring risk to another organization in exchange for premium. That's how the insurance industry works. Regardless, you are going to put processes and procedures and certain initiatives in place to further mitigate that risk. So that's the key, and that's going to become part of your game plan and your strategy as a team and as a business and an organization, which is also the future. Our next episode, I know, is we're going to talk about how do you execute that plan? How do you then take that plan, the concept of that plan, and put it into action and execute on it so you achieve success?
No, that's great. And, so Devin, final thoughts?
I'm just going to piggyback on what Rob said. He made some great points about just getting everybody in the room. I probably sound like a broken record, but when you talk about mitigating risk, there can't be any gaps with any type of risk. And the only really way to prevent that is communication with everybody involved. So just get everybody, management team together, key employees, your insurance people, your attorneys, your CPAs, whoever it is you need in the room. Everybody communicate so you completely bulletproof your entire business and nothing slips through the cracks.
It's great. And Laura?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I really have to add to Rob and Devin is when you're sitting down with your trusted advisors, taking all the information, listen to them, mull it over, and really make a list of what the priorities are for you for risk as a business owner, because the priorities are going to be different for everyone, and address those top 3 priorities with your trusted advisors so you can focus on what's most important to you. And then we'll see if we can add anything else to that. But that is what I would do as a business owner, is make my top priorities for mitigating risk and discuss with my partners.
That's great. And we really appreciate all the insight from you guys this week. I also thank you, Rob, for letting me drive the ship this week. We're excited to have Laura
Fantastic job, Brian.
Laura back in action. So we're excited. Some very important topics today. make sure if you're listening, watching the show, to subscribe. Also, start reaching out. Let's start taking some action and start implementing some of these strategies that we're talking about, because at the end of the day, they're all for your benefit and for all of our benefits as business professionals. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, guys.